I'm Alisha Sommer, and this is how I create.
Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else.
Hi there, it's Martine Séverin. Think about the things you do in life that make you happy, the things that keep you centered, such as journaling or writing. Imagine creating a living out of those interests. Today, we welcome Alisha Sommer to the podcast. Alisha is a photographer, marketer, and writer based out of Napa Valley. She's known for her moody photography, her writing, and great knowledge of wine. During our conversation, Alisha shares her morning routine, how she developed her eye, and how she came to articulate her boundaries to her loved ones. Enjoy. I'm Martine Séverin. We welcome Alisha Sommer, freelance writer and photographer, to the guest chair today. Based in Napa Valley, California, Alisha has a gift for holding sacred space for deep listening and for seeing the ordinary in extraordinary ways. Currently, you'll find her hosting creative gatherings in Sonoma, California, like the Fever Dream Collective Retreat with Jeanette Nielsen, and facilitating the online writing workshop Liberated Lines with Robin Sandomierski. You can find her work in Magnolia Journal, Vine Pair, Wine Enthusiast, Chicago Reader, and more. Welcome to the show, Alisha.
Thank you for having me, Martine.
I'm so pleased to talk with you. I reached out to you a few years ago because I wanted to attend the Fever Dreams Collective Retreat that you were holding with Jeanette. And I think for some reason or another, it didn't quite work out. So I'm pleased to be chatting with you today.
Yeah, it's so nice to be talking with you too. I feel like which happens all the time, is like we were close to each other in the city, and then life happens, and now I'm across the country, and virtually works too. I'm just glad to be connected.
I wanted to start out by asking you about your day. Can you walk me through your morning from the first time you wake up?
So first thing I do is I get completely ready for the day. I remember just being a stay-at-home mom with really young kids and trying to figure out like how to not feel awful all day long. And they were like, you just get ready like you're going to be leaving the house, even if you're not. It was set the tone for the day. So I just kind of really established that as part of my routine. And get ready, get fully dressed, even if I'm not going to be going anywhere. I journal. I do my morning pages every morning, and usually with my coffee. And then that's usually when I am also doing like a morning self-portrait. I used to be like almost every single morning. I've kind of gotten in the habit of doing all the time, but a good way for me to like figure out or just find space to make something if I don't know if I'm going to actually have dedicated time for, unbridled creativity like I would like to have, which all of us would like to have. I have 3 kids, so with the 3 of them home doing distance learning, it means doing a little bit of my day job as a marketer and then getting everybody set up and awake to be in their Zoom calls for school, and then just kind of like going through the day and ending it with a little bit of wine and a nice dinner. And then I try to go to sleep by 10 o'clock because I'm an early riser. But and in between that, also, again, like trying to find a little bit of time to do something mildly creative, whether that's making notes on something and writing or taking another picture in the evening that's features wine for that day.
You post on Instagram regularly, and I often find myself, and it's a little bit of a treat for me, when the day seems to be going by really quickly and I need a pause. Do you know that I often go on your blog, on your website, I should say, to read what you've written that morning? It's a calming tradition now, I guess, or a routine now that I have. Because I can scroll back and see that all that you've done. And because of you, I got this journal. It's called Some Lines a Day. It's a 5-year memory book is what it's called. And they only give you a bit of space, but every day you write for that specific day. I'm looking at, we're recording this on September 26th. So
it's like September 26, 2020, September 26, 21, and so on and so forth. So then over 5 years, you have a journal. But this is all because of you. You inspired me.
Oh, I love that. Well, and you know what I love about that too, Martine, and like that a journal like that specifically. I was just doing a journaling workshop for an affinity group at a winery organization called Women of Wine, but they do little, try to do like little team building things. And so we were doing a journaling workshop, and that's like my biggest thing that I want everybody to leave away with is that journaling doesn't have to be like this big thing where you feel like you have to sit down for an hour and have giant chunks of time to write out every single little detail. Like you can, I think it can be just as effective and just as important just to scribble a few lines a day, like just getting something out of your head and onto paper. So I love that you found a journal that also just it reduces the sense of overwhelm. Like you have to add one more task to your day, but everybody really can find time to write like 3 sentences.
I
You know?
agree.
Yeah.
So have you always been a writer then?
Yeah, I have. I've always, when I was a kid, I was a big reader, voracious reader. I was just telling somebody yesterday, like I was the kid in class, like had a book underneath the desk while the teacher was talking. Like I wasn't ever paying attention in class. I was always reading, and I always loved writing. Had dreams of just being, locked away in a house on the seashore, and like the wind blowing through, and just that was my day. I would just be writing all day long. But then like you get older and you go to school, and people are like, no, you have to do something real, like because people don't make money doing doing that. And so I tried to take a more practical path. But after I became a stay-at-home mom, I realized that, one, I was an adult now and I got to choose. And secondly, I just felt this need to return to my creativity. I felt like becoming a parent really made me question like what my passions were. And so I just kind of started going back into that process of like, okay, what can I do to feed my creativity? I love writing. Let me just get back into writing. And so it's kind of been steadily more and more a part of my life now. Now that I committed to that being like the real thing that feeds me.
So when you were little and you just dreamt about being a writer, what did you want to write? What did you dream about specifically?
Oh, all kinds of books. I Now they have the term fan fiction for, which I don't think exists. I didn't have that term as a kid, but like I would take movies that I liked and kind of like rewrite them using the characters from that and use that as inspiration. But I loved books like Anne of Green Gables series and like The Babysitter's Club. And I read things that I probably should go back and reread because I was probably too young to read them. I was reading Dickens when I was younger, and just the idea of being able to create these other worlds and also just telling stories. Like I don't know, I just wanted to be the person that made something that other people really wanted to read too, just as much as I loved reading my favorite authors.
It's interesting to be a mom because I go back and we reread those books with my little one. There's so much that you miss as a child too when you reread them, isn't there? Whether
Yeah.
it's Anne of Green Gables or the Beverly Cleary books. I used to love those as well when I was little.
It's interesting to like have the context of like a full life, like or more life, lived experience, and you can see things in a different way. I find it fascinating too. It's kind of a neat experience.
You said specifically that once you had children that you had to think about what your passions were. Can you tell me what your passions were before you hit that stage?
I was still a creative person and I really loved people. And so like in high school, I was in theater. So I was in drama all through high school, a lot of community service work, and I played sports. And so I feel like it was, oh, and then I did have a summer job working at a cookie shop in the mall, Mrs. Fields Cookies. If we all remember the things that used to be in malls, but a Mrs. Fields cookie, which I loved because I got to make the cookie cakes, which meant that I was like decorating things with frosting all day long. Those were the kinds of things that I guess I still was keeping myself involved in some creativity in that way, like between drama and like being working at the cookie shop. But it was always still like the thing that was just the treat that I got to do, not a thing that I thought that I would ever be able to craft a life from. And then I got to college and I tried to do printmaking, a little bit of dabbling here and there, but always kind of tucked behind this idea that I still need to be more practical in my life with how I was approaching like a career. But I feel like I have always had this undercurrent of creative energy and finding like little ways to enjoy it or use it.
And are you practical now?
Haha. Yeah, I am, but I'm trying to move away from that, right? That's why I got a job as a marketer. I was like, well, I mean, the practical thing, if I'm not gonna like make a ton of money being a writer or photographer, which again, kind of shifting the mindset around that, I was like, I'll just do marketing because that's like a quote unquote real job, but it uses the things that are really interesting to me, like writing and photography. Marketing is just storytelling, right? It's how do you communicate something and engage people in a way that makes them want to engage with your product or service, right? So I was like, okay, I'll just be a marketer. That'll be fun. But, I don't really love Google Analytics. I can read data. I don't love poring over it like over my morning coffee, and I don't get any jollies from it. But I do love that, at least with marketing, I get to exercise some creativity. And like in my job right now, I do a lot of content creation. So I do get to go to the winery and the vineyard and take pictures. And then I do try to craft stories from that and write blog posts for the wineries that I think are a little bit more interesting and engaging for people. So I'm still kind of practical in that sense. Like it's like I don't want to say, I don't even want to use the word legitimate job because I feel like there are tons of people who do all kinds of art, whatever art means for them, and they have a successful and fulfilling life. So I don't want to say it's a legitimate job, but in my mind, when we moved out here, I was like, I have to do like the real thing or a quote unquote real job. But what's going to give me the opportunity to use my creativity the most? And I was like, marketing. That's what I'm going to go into.
Can I ask what brought you to California?
My husband comes from the restaurant scene, and I always say that I was drinking wine before I met him, but he did broaden my palate and like my exposure to different types of wine, and I just kind of really fell in love with it. And over time, just studying and learning more and more, it's one of those things that I'm an avid learner. Like I love learning things all the time, and I realized that it's like history, it's science. It's meteorology, like you're learning weather patterns and how that affects the growing, it's agriculture. Like there's so much that's not just wine. There's so many things that go into making wine, and I found it fascinating. He left the restaurant scene and started selling wine for a distributor, and he won a trip to Sonoma, and I came with him, and I was like, I moved around growing up, and people used to always ask me if I was from California because I didn't have an accent, compared to wherever we were living. And I'm like, no, I've never lived there, but I'm sure it could be awesome because it looks amazing. So after I got my first trip, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is the real deal. Like I could totally live here. I'm really drawn to nature. And so just the landscape itself was so beautiful to me. And, it's trees and there's proximity to the ocean. You have mountains, these big, huge blue skies. My husband and I both knowing that we wanted to further our careers in the wine industry specifically. And, this is just where it happens. Like Napa Valley is like the quintessential wine region in the United States. And so the older I get, winter was getting harder and harder on my body. I was ready to not have to shovel snow ever again.
You're right. I just can't do snow anymore. I'm like, sooner or later, we have to leave and go somewhere warm. So I have to laugh along with you. As long as I've known you, you've lived in the intersection of food, wine, and words. Those are the different sections of your blog. How did you decide to categorize it in under those three subjects?
Yeah. So like the idea for the blog was about the things that I found essential for me, for my living, and what I find beauty in. I really love cooking and love food. And once I became a stay-at-home mom, like I didn't really come from a family that was super into food. My mom baked a lot, which I loved growing up, but she wasn't like a great like regular everyday cook. She probably doesn't like when I say this on podcast all the time, but she was not a great cook. Fantastic baker, not a great cook. So I didn't really grow up in a food culture really, but when I became a stay-at-home mom and like money was super tight and like we were just so broke, like I learned or realized that I needed to learn how to cook from scratch because it was just way cheaper than what I was doing before. And so over the time, I just developed a real love and passion for cooking and food and really appreciating quality ingredients or fresh ingredients. And then with wine, same thing. I just have always appreciated things. And these are the things that bring me joy and that I've found so much beauty in. And so I categorized the website into those three things because they're the things that like literally feed me in some way or figuratively feed me, like, words and inspiration, beauty, art. That's nourishes the soul. but food and wine also nourish the body and the spirit too. So I felt like all of those things at the end of the day actually had a lot in common with each other. I started picking up a camera right at the beginning when IG started, and I had writer's block. And I was like, you know what? I don't feel like writing. I had like 3 kids under the age of 5 at that time. So I was like, I don't feel like writing. I don't have the energy to write, but I can use my camera. And I was depressed. Like I could use my phone. I needed something that I felt was going to like lift my spirits. And so I literally just started looking for the light with my camera in my phone and like just sharing that on Instagram. And then over time, like I just started to really enjoy it. And I remember one of my husband's colleagues who is a photographer. He did fashion photography in New York back in the day, and he still does a lot of hobby photography now. And he said, he's like, you have a natural gift. He's like, you have the eye. He said, all the technical stuff you can learn later on, but the one thing you can't teach people is how to see. And so it was really encouraging to me to hear that. So I just kind of continued to develop my eye. Like I just started paying attention more. And after he said that, VSCO, Visco had like a scholarship where they gave you like access to the platform for free. So like I had this opportunity to like really play around with filters and like learn how to adjust editing. Then I told my husband, like, I want a real camera. Like I don't want to use my iPhone anymore. Like I want a real camera. And so then I got one, a very basic DSLR from Sony, which you know very well. That just kind of catapulted me into a different way. And I still to this day, it's really funny, Martine, because I'm not a technical photographer at all. I barely use lighting, and I'm learning more to like into how to integrate that into what I do. You know, I'm still learning how to like take more clearer pictures with manual. Like there's so much technical stuff that I really really have to learn, but it was just a thing that I feel really fortunate and blessed that I was able to grab this new way of being creative and expressive. And I think what I loved is that like pictures do actually tell 1,000 words, right? Like there's so much that you get from an image. And as a writer too, I think it's just been fun to have that interplay.
Do you remember the steps you took to develop your eye?
Just a lot of taking pictures. It was just repetition. Kind of like you said, like being so consistently posting on Instagram. And it's kind of like the 10,000 hours thing. I was just telling my mom this because she sent us another set of masks that she made. And I'm like, oh, these are so much better than the first ones because you've been making masks or practicing prototypes every day for like the last 6 months. And honestly, I think that was really it. It was also like looking at as Instagram grew, seeing more photographers work and be like, wow, that's really beautiful. How did they get that? And so there's also a little bit of imitation too, which we do with writing as well. Like we always say one of the ways to kind of figure out what your voice is going to be is sometimes you have to imitate others. Like whose work do you really love? Try writing in that same style. But over time, like you develop your own personal nuance and your own language and your own voice. And so I think that's part of it too. It's like this repetition. It was looking at inspiration and seeing like, okay, I want to be able to do that. Let me go see if I can. And then just kind of keep practicing that style. And then I think over time, like you learn what you like and learn what you don't like. There was a period of time where everybody was doing like super overblown white pictures, like super light and airy. I was like, I don't like it. I'm a moody person. I like dark photos. And, everybody's got white photos, but mine are going to just be dark because that's what I like. Super high contrast, dark photos. Recognizing what I did and didn't like in photography and understanding what my own eye gravitated toward, that helped me also develop my style and technique.
Have you ever fought your eye?
Yeah.
By like trying to do something that your eye didn't or that you didn't want to do or that you didn't prefer? And I'll follow up as to why I'm asking this question in a little bit.
Yeah. So, yeah, because when you have clients, sometimes they need a certain look or there have been so sometimes again because I am a dark and moody photographer and people be like I don't like it and so I have to sometimes like go back and re-edit images because I'll tend to go darker. They need lighter imagery. And then there have been times where like people wanted darker photos and I was like but you're a nutritionist and I really feel like your images need to be brighter and lighter. It's gone both ways where like I've had to fight my eye to correct images for clients. And then there's been times where like I get what you want because you want your photos to look like mine, but you need to look like this because this is actually what makes the most sense for you.
That's so true because it seems like, the style and your eye in some ways, it's a tool and it can be applied in different ways. But it's so funny that people who've seen your work see that you do a lot of moody, high contrast work, and then they come and want something complete, like the opposite from you. But I suppose it harkens back to the fact that they want you, not necessarily,
Yeah.
yeah, the style of what you do. I wanted to talk about 10 things. So you've been consistently writing poetry, or do you call it poetry, or is it just 10 things that you call it?
Hmm. I call them 10 things, but I do consider it personally like the poetry of life. I look at it that way. Like the ordinary things in life are kind of like the poetry of our lives.
And how did you start?
I was listening to this podcast, the On Being podcast with Krista Tippett, and she interviewed this poet, Marie Howe. Everybody should listen to that episode just because it's actually just a beautiful conversation. But she described an exercise that she gave her writing students where the first thing she had them do, I think this is like her intro, like her freshman classes. She's like, the first thing she had them do was come in and write 10 things that they observed that day without metaphor or simile and like no flowery language, but like literally just things you saw or experienced in that day. Her point being that good writing is really about observation. Like, what are you seeing? Like, you have to be super present in the moment and seeing things, and like that shifts your perspective a lot in how you then write a story and communicate a story. Because a lot of people when they're first getting into writing, they want to be like these, you know, they want to be like Proust or like just they think they're going to just immediately be a Jane Austen right away. It's like, well, no, like you have to start somewhere, and some of that is just like from the very basic simple things of like how are you observing the world around you? That's what makes good writing. And that really inspired me. One again is like an easy journaling exercise. But also just like another way of being present. And I felt like, one of the things that our culture is really good at is making us not be present, like have us always in a constant state of focusing on the next thing instead of looking at what's right in front of us. And in that podcast, she also reads a poem about her brother. It's called The Gate. There's a line in there, and he's like, "This is what you've been waiting for." And she says, "What?" And he said, "This," waving my mustard and cheese sandwich in the air. And it was just also a reminder that like the ordinary things that we experience in our lives are actually what matter. Like at the end of the day, like, yeah, the big promotion is going to be fantastic, or, this vacation is super cool. But the reality is like none of us are doing these really big, amazing things every single day. We all have like a ton of laundry to do. We have to do the dishes. Somebody's got to clean the toilets. Like these are, that's like real life. That's what makes up your life. And so how do I look at that and the things that I'm doing in a new way? And over time it's evolved to where like I do put a lot of my interior thoughts into it, but I love it because it's a way of one keeping a record of your life. Like it's really fun for me to be like, wait, what wine did we drink at that dinner last night? And I can be like, oh yeah, I need to go back to August and like look for that day so I can remember the wine. So I love that aspect of it, but it also over time has just helped me to slow down my own mental process throughout the day. So like you practice more presence. Like once it's become a habit, it's makes you more present and more observant of your life. And for me, it just has helped me to see more of the beauty in like the everyday things.
So has this habit that you've developed, has that helped you with deep listening and creating that sacred space that you're so well known for doing? Or is that something that's a different practice that you've done or that you continue to do?
I think that I've kind of maybe a little naturally had that because I one of the things that I moved around a lot as a kid, and what that meant was you had to constantly be adapting to your new environment, and in this instance that means changing schools. And you learn, for better or worse, how to adapt by being super observant about what the culture is around you, right? So like I kind of learned that as a kid anyway, naturally. But I will say, as I've gotten older, slowing down and being even more present, or like getting back into the habit of being present and really listening, it helps me interact with people in a new and deeper way. Because if I feel myself having a reaction, I've actually just trained my brain to stop itself and be like, wait, what is this really about? Is this about what they said? Is it about me? Is it about them? And so therefore it just allows me to have a conversation in a different way, I think, than people normally would. I'm less reactionary, which means that it creates space for more conversation, if that makes sense.
So I'd love to talk about how this cascades to your family and your interaction with your family. And I ask this because currently we are all living in the world of COVID, and we're all spending so much more time with each other than ever before. And I find that with spending more time as a family, spending more time with your partner, that in some ways it's too much time. And and I find I'm so guilty of, because I'm having all this time, there's still things that need to do for work. And despite having the time also contracts because you have less time to spend on your own work because you are doing multiple tasks that you didn't have to do before, including being a teacher to your children and trying to balance all the everyday tasks of life. And because of that, I don't think that I listen as well as I used to listen, or I don't pay as much attention to the little things. Have you been able to keep that practice of slowing down and listening despite being living in this COVID world?
At the beginning of COVID, I was, because I was just so grateful to not have to spend 3 hours in my car commuting, or not, and to feel like I all of a sudden had this freedom with my time in a new way. And so I slowed down a lot. I would say like May through, or no, wait, this started in March through June, early June. I was super intentional about really slowing down and being more present, and it was lovely. But we started the process of moving in July, and I took on new, more client work after moving. And so I have noticed that I am not as good because that flurry of energy. And to your point too, Martine, like I am an introvert at the end of the day, and I need more solitude. There is no solitude. I try to find little places to hide from my family, but I can't. There in the old house, it used to be a hammock that was behind the tree. So like usually nobody could see me. They might wander around the inside of the house, and then they would finally realize I was outside, and then they knew not to bother me. Now it's been a little bit more of a challenge because we're all home all the time, and that's starting to wear on me. I am trying to get back to that practice of kind of slowing down a little bit more. I will say I was really happy and pretty chill at the start of COVID, but the last couple of months have been really challenging as we've entered into this extended, in month 7, 8, whatever's about to be here pretty soon. It's like I'm feeling it now too. So I have to do my own practices to kind of mitigate that.
I don't know what to say sometimes because I am introverted as you are, and I need that time alone, but there's nowhere to hide.
There's nowhere to go.
There's nowhere to go, and nowhere to hide. But I take it in doing your daily journal that you get to capture some of those moments. And it's kind of a practice of reflecting on a gratitude practice, I should say.
Yeah.
So it's all in one. So it must help in keeping you on the straight and narrow, or at least giving you a good perspective on life and on how the little things do matter and that you need to calm down. At least that's what I do.
Yeah. It reminds me, that practice, it reminds me of even when my kids were smaller and I was like, oh my God, I've got to make another snack. I'm like, you know what? Let me fake my joy in this in this cutting up the carrots. Let me just fake the joy. And I did a lot of that when my kids were little. I was faking it till I made it. But let me just practice some gratitude that I get to be home with my kids, because not everybody does. And I get to cut them up fresh vegetables because not everybody has the opportunity. And yeah, it's finding a way to have a gratitude in all those little things that I hate grocery shopping, but you know what? I'm so glad I can buy some groceries today. Let me just get it done.
Gratitude, yes. Alisha, what have you learned about yourself since becoming a marketer, and how has those things influenced your own personal work?
I feel like one of the things that I've learned the most is how to adapt. I guess and paying attention in a different way, right? It's okay, how do I don't want to say compromise. It is compromising. I think going from being a freelancer and staying at home to working in a traditional job setting where you work with people, I learned that you don't as a freelancer, you get to choose who you work with and for, right? Like there's a lot of intentionality behind that. And when I was a freelancer, there would be people I was like, no, just because like the vibe wasn't right. Like I got to choose that. When you're in a traditional workplace setting, you have all of these different personalities that you're now contending with. So I feel like what I've had to practice in a new way are people skills, because like I don't have a choice in this. I can't just be like, not today. Not gonna like we're not gonna do that today. I have to learn how to navigate different types of social situations, and so that's been good. It's just like a good practice for me. Again, kind of going back to that practice of deep listening is like, okay, what is actually the real issue here? What is my issue? Is my issue just that like I'm still transitioning into having getting used to not being the sole person in control of my time? Maybe that's just what I need to work on and like reframe the situation in a different way. I have also learned that I I can do a lot more than I thought I could. It's stretched me into new ways that forced me to grow and learn. So like there's some nights where I told you about Google Analytics. Continuing to learn about Google Analytics. Do I want to? No, but I can. And it's also fun, like learning something new, putting it into practice, and seeing a great result from it. And so that's been super encouraging, I think, in general. It's given me more confidence to take more risk, because I've been put in situations where like I wasn't expecting to have to learn really know Google Analytics or like really look at data in this way. But COVID changed my job a little bit, and it forced me into working in these channels in new ways. It's been great. That means like, oh, I can still learn something, apply it, and get a result from it. And that's exciting because that means that's something I can continue to do. And I have a photography client coming up here pretty soon. And I was like, I haven't technically done this kind of work before, but I have some of the other pieces. I think I can do this. Like I can do this. And I feel more comfortable taking a bit of a risk, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Are your photography clients mostly centered around wine now?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to break into. Although I like people so much that I still want to do the portrait photography thing. Like I really still want to get back into building that up. But yeah, a lot more focus on wine, but specifically product shots, right? So and it's like just super different because the things that I photograph, like when I photograph my wine at home, it's like there's not a I don't plan my Instagram content, and I'm not an influencer. People call me an influencer because of my following size, but that's not. I don't consider myself an influencer. I don't schedule things out. Like it's literally in the moment. I do it moment to moment. So now with the winery photography, it's pushing me into this like, okay, no, I need to set a scene. I need to style this. I need to really think about the story that I'm wanting to tell about this particular product. Whereas like my personal IG is like, I'm telling a story about me in my moment. So it kind of blends, like when I used to do website design for people, it's blending both of those. It's like, okay, what do you need? And what do you need this image to do for you? And so now how am I going to create that story so that it all kind of makes sense?
I think I have a good reference for you. There's someone who inhabits this world in terms of being a food and travel photographer, and she does a lot of wine. I'll send you her info so that you could reference it.
Oh, I
and
love
see.
that. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so I would love to know. Actually, can I have a question to ask that has nothing to do with our readers? It's something I'm really, really curious about. And it's something that I think I have a hard time with, which is making space for myself.
Mm.
And it seems like you're really good with carving that time out for you and allowing yourself to have that conversation with your inner being. Have you always been good with doing that, or is it something that you've developed over time?
No, I definitely developed it over time. You know what it was, Martine? When I became once I like decided as a stay-at-home mom that I needed to, or I wanted to have something of my own. Like I was just not feeling fed. I was in all of these creative groups online, and like online forums, and there were these women who were in their mid 40s or in their 50s who like all of their children had finally like left the nest, and a constant theme was, I don't know what to do with my life because I've only ever done like home taking care of the home. I've always been a homemaker. I totally lost myself through all of these last 20 years. And that was terrifying to me, quite honestly. I was like, I do not, because I'm young. I had my first kid at 22. I was like, by the time my youngest is out of the house, I'm gonna be their age. I'm gonna be 44 years old. I don't want to be 44 with all this life to live and like not feel so solid and like excited about finally having the time to explore my interest. And so I realized that in order for me to not be that woman later in life, I wanted to make sure that I spent time feeding myself as well. And so I got really good at my boundaries. Like once the kids got a little bit older and like I found that my husband, like it made him super nervous when the kids were babies to be alone with them all the time. Like I also recognized that like what is my partner's capacity for childcare needs and what is this? So it started out with me being like, everybody's taking a nap right now. So am I. Nobody's allowed to come in here for 2 hours. And whether I slept or not, I always had that 2 hour nap time block to myself. And, in the bedroom, door closed. And everybody just had to, my husband had to just deal with that. He's like, this is her nap, everybody's napping. This is her nap time. So he didn't have to worry about childcare because all the kids were asleep and he knew not to bother me, which meant I had my solitude. Then as I got older, I could be like, I'm going to go leave and have coffee today, like by myself. So, and then also just me getting better at communicating my needs. I think that was a struggle for me at the beginning was how do I articulate what my needs are and why so that my partner can support me in that instead of me just being frustrated with feeling like everybody's asking for things from me all the time and I have no time for myself. I was like, okay, I have to get better at communicating my needs and setting those boundaries. And so over time, realizing, and again, it's like sometimes things are not realistic based on your circumstances. I didn't always have expendable income. So that just meant maybe it's not coffee. Maybe I just get to go to the library and browse the bookshelves by myself. I'm not buying books, like I can just I just need to be out of the house doing things that feed me and getting me as close to what I want as possible. And so, it's just over time, learning how to feed those needs, but being really clear and communicating what those boundaries and needs are so that I could have them met. And now my kids are older. I have so much more free time and so much more freedom. And, like the kids are old enough where my partner doesn't feel like everybody kind of takes care of themselves at this point. Right. So it's like, hey, they can do it. They can do it if I let them do it also. And tell them that I need it so that I can be nicer to them. Nobody likes a mean mom. Nobody wants a mean mom. If they just leave me alone, I can be much nicer. Like, just let me have some time. I'll be
Oh
much
my
better.
gosh. So I stayed home with my little one until he was 4. And so I totally understand about needing time alone and setting those boundaries. But I love what you've just shared. And I'm going to have a think and articulate, as you said, what my needs are and tell my partner how he can support me. Darn it, that's what I'm going to do. So I have a fun question for you. If you were a wine, which wine would you be?
Oh, goodness. Okay. I would say that I would be you know what? I really love drinking Burgundy, but I think my temperament and my personality is really more like a Syrah, because Syrah is one it's totally underrated, kind of a misunderstood grape. You either love it or you hate it, but it has so much complexity depending on how every grape, every varietal can be made in like different ways to um, develop different flavors and profiles, but Syrah can be smoky and gamey. It can also have all of this herbaceous character and like this Grieg and dried flower and dried fruit and pepper. And it can oftentimes evolves a lot in the glass depending on the quality of Syrah you're drinking. But good Syrah is just this really amazing experience. And so I think I'd like to be Syrah. I'd be a Syrah from France. Yeah, just kind of complicated, a little moody, but really complex and a lot of depth.
I always thought that I would be a Chateauneuf du Pape. Because I feel like, when you drink one, it's a mouthful. It's just, there's so much complexity in that. And so then here's another wine question for you. So if you were a summer water, aka rosé, which rosé would you be?
I would be something from Provence. I love just super light, crisp, refreshing, easy drinking, because I think that's what I love about rosé. Again, rosés are made in a variety of styles, but I love the ones that are just really crisp, bright, make your mouth continue to water. Yeah, and also like low alcohol, so like you can drink a lot of rosé at your lunch and not feel like you can't like go make dinner later.
Yeah, I understand. I used to live in the south of France, in Aix-en-Provence, so like I just love me a rosé. It's my jam. Okay. Alisha, thank you so much for chatting with me.
And thank you for having me. Like I said, I'm super inspired by your work, so it's incredibly flattering, and I'm really honored that you see so much beauty in what I do, because I see so much beauty in what you do.